Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Showcase of Speakers presented by Capital City Speakers Bureau. I'm Aaron Rayberg, Account Executive at Capital City Speakers Bureau, coming to you live. Springfield, Illinois. We're happy to have you here. I hope it's as beautiful where you're at today. So today we've got 7 great keynote speakers that I want to introduce to you. You're going to hear 10 minutes from each of them on a snapshot of their presentations. Now, at Capital City Speakers Bureau, a showcase is nothing new to us. We've done 24 live showcases in Springfield, Illinois for our local meeting planners. And many of you viewing today have had the pleasure of attending those showcases. But today we're coming to you through a new platform on the web, and we are excited to be able to broadcast to our entire meeting planning partner audience throughout the United States. Now, this is the first time that we've done this digitally, so I want to throw out a little technology knock on wood. We hope that technology cooperates today. But if you have a technical issue, you can email us at info@capcityspeakers.com. Someone from our team will help you out. Okay, a guide for you viewers today. You should have received a link to a workbook featuring the speaker's photo, their bio, and some information below each speaker where you can make notes and tell what you liked about each of the keynote speakers. And at the end of the workbook, you got an information sheet where you can jot down any information and make a request to book a speaker for your future event. Capital City Speakers Bureau will facilitate information gathering and requests for booking for all the speakers that you see today. Okay, now for the main event. To get things kicked off, we've asked one of our keynote speakers, Laurie Guest, to MC the event for today. So not only are you going to hear Laurie keynote, but she'll be your host for today. We're super excited to have her. I'm going to turn it over to you, Laurie.
So welcome, everyone. I just want to tell you a little bit about how today's going to work in addition to what Aaron said. Each of our speakers normally works on the platform, and being experienced meeting planners, you know that our energy level and the way that we would engage with the audience is totally different than sitting here in front of this little teeny tiny camera lens that we're looking at. And so I just want to tell you right off the bat is that you have to imagine us up and moving and engaging, and that's really an important part to the success of the digital showcasing. It certainly is convenient to do it this way, but it is a little bit different than we are in front of our live audiences. So we hope you'll keep that in mind. I personally have met each one of the speakers on the panel today, and I'll tell you, you got some tough choosing to do. In fact, maybe you can use us all because they are a fantastic group of people. So we are ready to get started with our first speaker. Our first guest has spoken to over 1 million people internationally and in all 50 states. From cops to gang members, from surgeons to school superintendents, from lawyers to realtors. He addresses corporate executives and social service advocates of all kinds. Thousands of organizations rely on Craig to help them transform the obstacles that keep them stuck. He lifts them up and breathes new life into their purpose. So please welcome from Denver, Colorado, Craig Zablocki.
Thank you, Laurie. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Great to be here. I tell you what, let me just show you my vantage here in Colorado. There's some nice weather going out here. I want to start wherever you're sitting. It's one-on-one kind of. I want to start with a quick activity. So if you wouldn't mind, just to make the okay sign with your right hand. Just go ahead and make the okay sign. I know there's people maybe around you. Thank you. And go ahead and simply place it on your chin. Go ahead and put it on your chin, everybody. On your chin. I see some of the other speakers on your chin. Chin, chin, chin. Okay, good. Excellent. Ridgeley, way to go, bro. Yeah. So when I do this in a group, 95% of the people put it on their cheek. I was saying chin, but I was doing cheek. What's the point? We model behavior. Your actions speak so loudly, I can't even hear what you're saying. I have a question for every one of you right now. If I was going to ask, can you paint a picture? What would your answer be? My experience with thousands of people, less than 5% of adults raise their hand when I ask the simple question, can you paint a picture? Now, you might be sitting there and you have a kindergarten first grader, or you know someone who has a kindergarten first grader. When I walk into a first grade classroom and I ask that same question to a group of kids, how many of you can paint a picture? How many hands do I have up? That's right, all of them. So then I'll ask the audience, based on this informal study, you tell me who has more self-confidence and self-esteem, a group of kids or us here in the room. And inevitably, all the hands go up for kiddos. Not a lot of self-help books for 4-year-olds, right? How to become a better 5-year-old. The 7 healthy habits of a 6-year-old. Here, son. Doesn't happen. So if that's true, I believe there's a lot to learn from kids or those qualities that we had before we grew up. You guys with me? Okay. So some other quick qualities that kids have that we've kind of lost. They did a study, University of California, Berkeley. The average, guess how many times the average 5-year-old laughs on a given day? Any idea? 250 times a day. How about you and I? 7. What are we modeling for kids? Grow up, get serious, act your age. Interesting. What are some other qualities kids have? Well, they're creative. A study done in London, 93% of 5-year-olds test out as creative geniuses. By the time they're 10, it goes down to 32%. By the time they're 15, only 12% test out as creative geniuses. And by the time they're 20, only 2% test out as creative genius. So what does that say? We had it, and then we kind of lost it. You guys following? Another thing, what about kids? If I was to ask a group, and I do this in an audience, I'll ask whether it's 1,000, 100 people, whatever, I'll say, hey, I need a volunteer to come up and help me do something. It's going to be fun, you're going to learn something new, and you're going to be supported. Guess how many hands I have up? Less than 5% of adults. Now let's go back to the first grade classroom again. Same question, I need a volunteer. It's going to be fun, you're going to learn something new. You're going to be supported. How many hands do I have up? All of them. So let's look at employee engagement. We talk so much about employee engagement. Gallup had a poll, 73% of American workers are disengaged at work. And of those, 20% are roaming the halls, spreading discontent. So here's the deal. We were engaged at that early age. Think about it. You might have kids at that age, you go to the playground, right? You're sitting on the bench, supervising the kiddos. Did you ever once have your kid come up, sit next to you and go, gee, Dad, this looks like a blast. I want to sit here and watch the kids. No. So our innate qualities are about creativity, how about honesty? I didn't even talk about that. Who's more honest, kids or us? Let's say I was talking right now and I had a dangler hanging out of my nose, all right? As adults, you'd be kind of telling your mate over there, hey, come look at this guy. He's got a dangler. Nobody would say anything. I know you can't because you're there and I'm here. But in an audience, nobody would say anything. Now, if there was a 4-year-old in this room and they saw that, what would they say? Hey, you got a goober on your nose. So they're totally honest, totally honest. Another thing, they have enthusiasm. How many of you have seen 4-year-olds playing soccer? You might have seen 4-year-olds playing soccer. If you haven't, check it out. It's like swarm ball. They go this way, they go that way. So I was downtown in Denver at the park not too long ago. My buddy's kid was playing soccer. So they're swarming around. All of a sudden, Michael stops in the middle of the field. The rest of the swarm continues. Now I'm standing next to Dad. Dad's concerned. Is he physically hurt? Is he emotionally traumatized? You know, what's up with Mike? All of a sudden, Michael in the middle of the field stops. His arms start going back and forth like this. He's like this. He's like, man, I love this game. And then he catches up with the kids again. Now, the question to you, how many of you walked in to your place of work this morning, big old smile on your face, arms whipping back and forth saying, man, I love this job. I don't know. And why don't we? Why don't we? I'll ask people, why don't we? And most often what I get is the fear of embarrassment. So kids don't have a fear. They don't have a lot of fear. There's only 2 fears we're born with, fear of falling, fear of landing. Children, they don't care about embarrassment. So my whole tactic on that is instead of trying so hard not to be embarrassed, why don't we be comfortable being embarrassed? You know, just doing little things. I was at the store the other day. I was walking along and I took some bananas, put in my head, balanced the bananas, walked around for at least 5 minutes shopping. Nobody said anything. So children have so much to teach us. Oh, another quick little story. When I asked that question, how many of you can paint a picture? It was about probably 3 months ago. I was with a bunch of agriculture folks and there happened to be a kid there with grandpa. This is great. So I said, how many of you can paint a picture? And this kid has his hand up. So I had the mic. So I went over to him. I said, what's your name? He's like, William. I said, William, how old are you? He's like, 6. I said, William, can you paint a picture? And listen to what he said. He went, yeah. And I said, okay, how about all your friends at school? I asked him a stupid question. How about all your friends at school? He's like, yeah, duh. I'm like, okay. So he was an outgoing kid. I said, you mind jumping up on this chair? So big hotel lobby, he jumped up on the chair. I said, look at all those adults out there. There's about 800 folks in the audience. I said, most of them said, they couldn't paint a picture. Why do you think that is? And I give him the mic. This little kid's looking around. He's like, oh, they just don't have their paint supplies. Of course, we could paint if we had our paint supplies. So here's the deal. Folks at your work, they have their paint supplies, but we have stuff that keeps us. So we got limited time here, but there's qualities, 30 qualities that kids had that we've kind of lost. And my whole deal is this. And you know how people write things on their bathroom walls or their mirrors? I got a little something for you right here. I'm going to visit my bathroom. Here's the deal. It's not about learning. It's about unlearning. Are you with me here? So how do we unlearn the things that keep us from these more innate qualities? And that's how we have fun in the workplace. And fun and productivity are not mutually exclusive. In fact, it's the opposite. All kinds of organizations, Southwest Airlines, all these organizations I've worked with, where fun, a spirit of fun, enhances morale, enhances less turnover, affects the bottom line. So there's legitimate reasons we need to kind of inspire more fun. So how do we do that? Real quickly, how do we unlearn? And what do we unlearn? There's 3 things. Ready? Here's my little flip chart. Fear, the few things. Get that little thing? Okay, few, oh, cute, clever, whatever. Fear, number 1. We got to look at, if we don't have, see, it's impossible for me to be happy, joyful, laughter-filled, creative if I'm living in this area. Are you guys with me? Are you with me sitting there at your desk? Okay. Cool. So let's look at fear real quickly. How do we address fear? Well, someone once said, courage is not the absence of fear. It's seeing something greater than our fear. So I would suggest 2 things. Number 1, again, get comfortable being embarrassed. When you're driving home today, here's what I'd like you to do. You're at the stoplight. You know how you're at the stoplight, we kind of check each other out. I want you to stay there and just kind of work it. Just start working it. Exaggerate if you have to. Give yourself about 5 seconds and go, huh, like that. 6 out of 10 times, you're going to get some laughs right there. So take yourself lightly. That's one thing. And then have a purpose. How do we have our mission, our purpose that's bigger than ourselves? When we're inspired, like we'd give our liver to our kids. Are you with me? So when we have a purpose, then our personality doesn't matter so much. In other words, what you think of me. See, kids are not self-conscious. So that's fear. Okay, I got the peace sign. Right on. Thank you. All right. So another thing is worry. And the ego, let's talk about ego. Just take yourself lightly. Worry, I'm going for it. I'm jamming it. Worry, study on worry. Out of 100 things that you're worried about, only 3 are in your domain of influence. Isn't that amazing? So let's stop worrying. I was on the plane, last story. I was on the plane with my son. He was 4 years old. He's 20 now, flying from Minneapolis to Duluth, Minnesota, okay? Hit major league turbulence. Our belts were on. He'd been on at least 50 flights. All of a sudden, what did all the adults do? They're like this, right? I mean, we would have caught air. But it was like, Now, Charles is 4. What's he doing? He's like, wee, like that. So I look at Charles, and I think, I'm going to join him. So I'm like, woohoo. And the 2 of us are doing that. Now, here's the insanity of adulthood. Across the aisle, this sophisticated woman, she's like, ah, like that. And we're like, wee. She's like, ah. We're like, wee. Finally, she's like, what the hell are you doing? I'm thinking, what are we doing, son? That's right. Drop your arms. You know, Dad forgot to teach you. But as you grow up and become an adult in America, there's going to be so many things out of your control. And what we like to do as adults is develop ulcers. Yeah, so start gritting your teeth. Attaboy. You feel the acid reflux coming up? Excellent. We have lots of pharmaceuticals. Take some of those. Or better yet, how about 2 scotches? 2 small bottles of scotch? Attaboy. Found a way. Now, here's my theory. Did I have control of that plane? Did my son have control? No. Did the woman next to me? No. Does this help? No. Life is like that. Sometimes it's smooth, sometimes it's up and down. It's our reaction to everything. My theory, in conclusion, is this. I think pilots are bored. I think they get to 36,000 feet. They're like, folks, seatbelt signs on. Feel free to walk around, enjoy the 2.5-hour flight to Denver. And they're like this, and they just, about 45 minutes goes by, and they're like, yeah, let's do it. Turbulence is all made up. So have fun. That's what it's about. God bless. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Craig. You are always a pleasure to listen to. We are jumping right into our second speaker. Let me tell you a little bit about him. In 2009, Jason Schenker founded Prestige Economics, a top-ranked financial market research firm that offers corporate and institutional clients a retainer service. Prestige Economics also performs management consulting and forecasting projects. Prior to founding Prestige Economics, Jason worked for McKinsey as a risk specialist, where he was responsible for directing the content of trading and risk initiatives on 6 continents. Before McKinsey, he worked for Wachovia as an economist. For more than a decade, Jason has been a keynote speaker and presenter at conferences and an occasional host for Bloomberg Television, columnist for Bloomberg News, and a guest on CNBC. Jason is going to be doing a screen share where he shows us some of his slides, and so we will toggle between Jason and the information he has to share. So from the Lone Star State of Texas, please say hello to Jason Schenker.
Thank you very much, Laurie. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. It's a real treat to be able to do this remotely. What I normally talk about are 3 things that the groups I speak to find of interest: markets, the economy, and future technology. Now, occasionally, from time to time, I'm told that I can only use one chart. And when I do, this is the chart that I show them. I show them what are called global PMIs, or purchasing manager indices. One of the things that we've been very good at is forecasting commodities, currency rates, and economic indicators. In fact, Bloomberg's ranked us #1 in the world in 21 categories since 2011 for agricultural commodities, metals, energy, as well as a number of currencies and economic indicators. And when people ask me, how do you forecast things, I tell them that there's a lot of noise out there, but there's some data that matters a lot, but only a few key pieces. And these are 3 of them. What these are is surveys, right? So it's not just some statistical data. You're actually doing a survey of purchasing managers. Purchasing managers, they buy real stuff, right? They're the ones, they're in companies. You're asking them month after month, are you buying more this month versus last month? And so for something like these PMIs, if the majority of the group is buying more this month versus last month, the number's above 50. And that means that the economy will be expanding. Because if a purchasing manager in a factory has to buy new stuff to fill new orders, when the orders get filled, they go into GDP. Now, there's a couple interesting things that I tell you about this chart right here, and that's that there are 3 lines. One's for the US, one's for China, one's for the Eurozone. Again, the 50 is the break-even line. And what you'll see is a couple of things. The blue and the green lines are above 50, and the red line is right now below it. And actually that red line, which represents China, was below it for 18 of 19 months between December of 2014 and June of 2016. This is the deal. That PMI indicates that in China there was a manufacturing recession. So here, you might have heard the phrase, there are lies, damned lies in statistics. Well, Dante's Inferno of the next level of data hell involves Chinese statistics. Are they good? Are they worth anything? Well, I'd say the Chinese Caixin manufacturing PMI is, because it's a privately compiled survey of small and medium-sized businesses. And does it matter? Of course it does. Because if you were to look at what happened to, say, aluminum prices that fell sharply at the end of 14 and through 15 when China was in that manufacturing recession, or oil prices that did something similar, or steel prices that did something similar, what you would realize is, indeed, China was in a manufacturing recession. This data matters. It's a leading economic indicator. And so something I talk to companies about a lot, they wonder about data lakes and data marts and all the data they're collecting. 90+% of all the data in the world has been created in the last 2 years. What's useful, what's good, chances are not as much of it as you think. And you have to make sure you identify what really matters. For commodity markets, for industrial markets, these matter. For agricultural markets, things are different. For agricultural commodities, aside from the weather, you find global growth drives long-term caloric intake, but also that grains are driven by planting and substitution effect, and sugar prices are influenced by fuel prices. We've been top ranked at most of these commodity prices, and this is really important because, especially for the fuel thing, it's not something most people think about. Something else that people don't often think about is that the U.S. economy is comprised of four things. You do the math of what the economy is. It's government spending, it's investment, it's consumption, and it's net exports. And if we looked at something like business investment from last year, I don't know, maybe it would surprise you, maybe not, to see these red circles on this chart here, which is from GDP, and you'll see there's red circles in the end of 15 and 16. Those indicated that the U.S. economy, that business investment in the U.S. economy was in recession for a chunk of last year. Even residential investment, that's housing, was in recession for part of last year. So some industries were hurting really hard last year. When they want to know why, was it just oil and gas? No. Was it just manufacturing? No. It was all business investment. And as a matter of fact, we do a quarterly survey of our own clients, and we ask them every quarter, what are you expecting from business? When we asked them last October, what we found was that 89% of them expected the next recession to start by the end of 2017, with 100% expecting the recession to start by the end of 18. Those are the blue bars here. But when we reconducted the survey in January, that fell sharply to 21% this year. And what we found in April is it had fallen to only 11%. So while 89% of our clients had expected a recession to start by the end of this year back in October, only 11% felt that way in April. Big turnaround has a lot to do with expectations of fiscal policy. There's been a huge discussion about why equity markets are up, and people tell you it's a reflation trade. But that doesn't make any sense. Inflation's below 2%. It's below the Fed's target. What has changed is an expectation of tax rates. And when you reduce tax rates, that drives up the valuations of businesses. There's typically a way to value businesses in public markets, market cap, number of shares, times the share price gives you a number. But when you look at private companies, or if you're an equity analyst who also does other modeling, you're probably looking at something called a discounted cash flow model. And in those models, the way you actually value a business, a lower tax rate makes your company worth more. And that's why equity markets are up a lot. One other thing I tend to talk to people about on the market side is equities. And they are very bearish, and they have is currencies, and they've been quite bearish on what's going on with the euro. One of the things I tell people is, you know, the euro is not dead. In fact, I have regular meetings with the European Central Bank, and I've told them that they have an ugly baby, and it's the euro. They have no choice to love it because it's theirs, and they can't bring it back. But the new ECB building that's been in place since 2014 should send that message. The euro is not dead. But if we were to look back a few years ago, you might have a different view, because the European Central Bank is the only central bank in the history of the world that ever had a nightclub in its basement. These folks are not central bankers here in this picture. The folks with the bunny ears, well, I mean, some of them might be, but generally speaking, they're not, and that's still a central bank. So if you ask me when I was worried about the euro, it certainly isn't after they built an Ayn Rand stylish building on the outside of Frankfurt. It might have been when there was a nightclub in the basement. Now, aside from talking about the economy or currencies or equities and business valuations, I also talk about future technology. And the most important thing that I talk about is the concept that the self-service revolution is real. I want you to think for a second about a number, and that number is the percent of retail sales that comes from e-commerce. If you're like me, there's people driving in and out of your neighborhood all day long, dropping off all kinds of packages. Maybe you go on Amazon or other online sites multiple times a day and order stuff, and it just shows up. You've got it coming from the postal service, the parcel shippers, randos, just dropping stuff off. But here's the deal. What percent do you think of all the stuff we buy comes from online? Think of a number. Now, you seem like, I know this is a smart group of people, so I know you were thinking of 8.5%, right? That's it. That's it, folks. It has been going up. It has been. The trend is there. This is a rising trend. This is the trend of e-commerce, and it's going up. But it's only at 8.5%. And so here's the deal. When people say we're worried about the robots taking all of our jobs, how many robots are we going to need when we get to the number you might have been thinking of? Maybe 20%, 30%? We're going to need all the robots, because there's just not enough people to drop all this stuff off that we're pointing and clicking and buying online, right? In-hand retail is going to drive everything. And we're also going to see that continue to accelerate with things like kioscification. And there is a threat that robots could take more jobs, but there is also a very strong weapon that we have against what I call the robocalypse. And that is what I'll show you now, a green room. Now, those of you, I know some of the other panelists have probably done a bunch of TV, so you've sat in these. This is a green room. It's not a green screen room. It's a room where people go to put on makeup before they go on TV. And I've shared a number of green rooms with some interesting folks. Michael Eisner, Carl Rove, and most recently the CEO of Uber. And, you know, it's very cool. But this is the most interesting green room I've ever been in. It was at UT Austin, where this used to be a classroom, and now it's where professors put on makeup before they go to record a class. So education is really the big thing here. Now, the last thing I want to say about the future of technology and the risk of robotics and automation taking jobs, I want to share this picture right here. And I want you to think of an airport where I saw this. So there's a robot dressed in a suit. It says, "We believe mutual funds should be managed by humans, not robots." Okay, you see the picture? I'll give you a hint. This was in Texas. And when you think of fintech and you think of future technology and robots and automation and robo-advising, I want you to think of that city in Texas that you think of when you see that picture. When you think of this robot, where do you think this poster resonates with people? And I know that you are all thinking of Amarillo, Texas, because that's where this poster was hanging last summer. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here. And just to know, everyone knows the robots are coming. Thank you.
And thank you, Jason, for being with us. So guess what? Our third speaker is this person named Laurie Guest. And we couldn't decide, do I introduce myself or do I give the reins back to Aaron? Well, the last thing I want to do is give the reins back to Aaron. I may never get that camera back. I think he's ready for prime time. And so I'm actually going to introduce myself. Is that weird, Laurie? I don't think that's weird. Go ahead and introduce yourself. And so I am a keynote speaker and trainer focused on customer service. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is I'm a certified speaking professional, and that is a designation that's held by less than 12% of all speakers worldwide. I am a farmer's daughter from the Midwest. I am known for my fast-talking, slightly sarcastic sense of humor and trying to keep the audience engaged and pens moving. So my time starts now. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is to see if you can figure out what that is a picture of. Do you know? Well, the answer is it's a moment in the car wash. One snapshot in time. And when that picture was captured, the way that the colors separate on the windshield gave it the most beautiful shade of lime and plum and turquoise. So beautiful, it's almost frameable. But I can promise you that 30 seconds later, that car wash didn't look anything like that. It was muddy, dirty, ugly water. And the only difference was a moment, one snapshot in time. And I think this is a perfect metaphor for customer service. See, whether you call your end user a customer, a client, a patient, or a patron, around here, we call them all guests. And every time that you encounter with a guest, every one of your team members encounters with a guest, it is an opportunity to make it a frameable moment, a good one, worthy of telling others about. Or it's muddy, dirty, ugly water, and they end up doing business somewhere else. Now, I know we have a variety of industries in the audience today, everything from ag to banking to healthcare to insurance and financial professionals. I don't care what your industry is. We all have this in common. We better make sure that when our guest encounters us, it's a wow experience. So my firm for the last 15 years, as one of the services we offer, is secret shopping. That's right. People hire us to pretend to be your end user. Oh my gosh, what a hoot of a job this is. I could keep you going the whole rest of the day telling you stories, both fantastic and absolutely terrible, about experiences in our secret shopping. But in the short time I have with you, I feel how I could benefit you the most is to share with you the 3 most consistent things that we see as a fail in the encounters that we have, and what can we learn from them. Now, I'm not saying everybody's guilty of this, but after having done it for years, the statistics are definitely in the favor of these 3 drops. So let me start with the first one, smooth transitions. What do I mean by that? Well, let's start out with banking as an example. I walk in, I do a lot of banks. I walk into the bank, I pretend that I'm there to get a loan. And most of the time I'm greeted by the welcome person at the counter or possibly a teller. And I tell them right away that I'm interested in getting a loan for a house, for a car, whatever scenario we're going to use. And most of the time the same thing happens. They greet me beautifully, they smile, and they say, if you'd like to have a seat right here, I'll let Bill know you need to see him. I take a chair and wait, and then they pick up the phone and I clearly hear them say, Bill, we got somebody here to see you. And then I wait. And then eventually a banker shows up. If he's good, he introduces himself, he finds out my name, and then escorts me to his office where the transaction begins or the conversation begins. They're missing a really valuable opportunity here called the smooth transition. If you think of our teams as a relay team in track, the real pros at the relay spend hours practicing what? The baton trade-off. If I am running in tandem with another runner, and we just get in the same sync, we can pass the baton smoothly and keep the speed going. Well, it's the same way with the transitions. So when we do training, we will train people, for example, the same bank scenario, I would ask the teller or the greet person to gather some initial information. What's my name? Why am I there? And then when you ask me to take a seat, instead of say, please wait there, I would simply change it to, if you'd like to relax here, Jim, our personal banker, will be with you in just a moment. Remember, when you go to that phone and pick it up, I can still hear you. The show timing should still be in place. And I want to hear that teller say, Bill, we have a new customer here by the name of Laurie Guest, and she's interested in talking to you about a loan. Great, I'll tell you you'll be right with her. And then check back and say he'll be right there. When Bill comes up, or Jim, whatever his name is, he reaches out, he reintroduces himself, and he starts by saying, Laurie, Tammy tells me you're interested in talking about a loan. If you'll please follow me this way. I know as I'm telling this to you, this sounds small. It sounds like a really no big deal, but I can promise you that on the error side of it not being good, it is dramatic. I just recently secret shopped a bank in Illinois where the teller said to me, you can go talk to that woman over there in green. I turned, I'm not kidding, it was St. Patrick's Day. There were 3 people in green. I said to her, which one? And she said, the one in the middle. As if I should know that. My point is that for this bank, they didn't get a great rating on their secret shop report. The loan officer was fantastic, but the transition was clunky and it didn't make me feel welcome. So idea number 1, smooth transitions. Idea number 2, love this, my favorite thing to teach, taboo word replacement. In the facility where I used to work for 18 years in healthcare, we had a taboo word list. Things that we taught our staff not to say to patients. So here's my 2 favorites. The first one is no, N-O. Take the word no out of your vocabulary and replace it with the word actually. Now here's what happens. You force a glasses half full statement. So let me give you an example. Healthcare. You call in and you say, hey, do you have any open appointments tomorrow? And the receptionist says, no, I'm sorry, we're all booked up, which I hear a lot when we secret shop. No, I'm sorry, we're all booked up. Let's transfer that sentence and listen to how much better this sounds. Actually, the next available appointment with Dr. Ross is Tuesday at 2 o'clock. How would that work for you? Now, I know it sounds scripted and robotic as I'm doing it into this camera, but in real life, we bring some personality to it. And the actually sounds so much better than telling a person no. Here's my second word replacement I love, sorry. Get it out of that vocabulary unless an apology is owed. I say stick those sorries in a sack. See, we think it's great customer service when we say sorry for this and sorry for that. That's not great service. Exchange it for different words. I'd like all of you to go back to your places of business and look and see if you have any sorry signs. You may not even realize how many you do have. Let me give you an example. In my local Best Buy store, we have 4 lanes where you can check out. And one day when I was in there, the first lane was busy. It was in use. But lanes 2 and 3, wide open, no waiting. 4th line has an engraved sign, and it says, sorry, this register temporarily closed. All right, now I realize when you're standing in line, you don't feel wronged by Best Buy, but way back here in your subconscious brain, your experience is not as good as it should be. That sign should simply say, we'd be delighted to help you at any one of our open registers. Same result, not checking out on lane 4, but the way I feel about it is different. Here's another brief example. I love this one. My local grocery store one day had planner peanut displays, big, huge cardboard display, and there were coupons you're supposed to rip off to get money off your peanuts. But all the coupons were gone on the 5 displays. And instead, all you saw in all caps, exclamation point, sorry, all coupons have been depleted. So as you're walking down the aisle, all you see is the planner sign and then sorry, 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 all the way across. Why are they apologizing? As a consumer, we're doing what they want, and yet they're telling us sorry. Now, I wrote to planters with this fantastic idea. They have not responded to me yet, even with a case of cashews. But I think that sign should use some humor. I think it should say, nuts, your neighbors beat you to it. See, use a little humor with that, and we have a better encounter. Small things, but you'd be amazed how often you say sorry. Here's another example. What about your outbound voicemail messages? How many of them say, hi, this is so-and-so. I'm sorry I'm not here to take your call. Why are you apologizing? Use that as a 20-second commercial instead. Let your customer know what you're doing that helps the productivity and helps meet the bottom line. The third one that I have on my list, remember, number 1 was smooth transitions. Number 2, taboo word replacement. And number 3 is positive positioning. Hey, when we're scheduling appointments or meetups for your customers, we want to make sure that we end that call in a positive way. So instead of saying, let's take financial planning as an example, instead of me saying, okay, I have you confirmed next Tuesday to see Sally, she'll go over your portfolio then, we change that. And we have the assistant instead say, well, I've got you confirmed for next week. And you know what? You are going to love Sally. She does such a good job of giving you options in your financial planning. I know that you're really going to appreciate. Whatever the words are, bring the real personality to it, but set it up to be a good experience. First impressions, from hello to goodbye, matter. Guest encounters is a way that we take a peek into that. We find out how well you're doing, and then bring your team together to give practical advice. My goal is to make pens move and hopefully make them laugh a little bit while we're doing it. Let's bring some energy. We all know that people are like, you've heard this cliche before, but it's so true. They're like pitchers of water, and their job is to keep refilling everybody's glasses, every customer, every coworker, every boss. How can they keep refilling the glasses if we don't help refill their pitchers? When you have your next association or corporate meeting, I hope that you'll consider me. Bring me in, bring some energy, and bring some practical advice. I'm Laurie Guest, and it's been my privilege to share with you. So there we go. I hope that Aaron is there and ready for what I know you are all looking forward to. He is. He's in the queue and ready to go. This is the next drawing. See, we keep you here, and by the way, we can see those of you who are in the room or watching. We have a great crowd here today, and I know that you have some fantastic speakers still in the wings waiting, and there's the tone. You hear the tone? It means it's dance time, and it's drawing time. There we go.
That's right. That's right. We got a couple more drawings. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I know that I am. A great job to Craig, Jason, and Laurie for kicking us off here. We've got 2 more drawings. Keep in mind, every drawing and every prize winner is going to receive some speaker books. And then in addition to that, we've got $100 Amazon coming up, and we've got a $100 cash drawing. So first up for the Amazon gift card. All right, I hope you're enjoying it. It's time for the second half. Laurie, I'm going to turn it back over to you for some more introductions.
All right, excellent. And we are ready to go with our 4th speaker of the day. Our next speaker, Ridgeley Goldsborough, believes in taking complex things and making sense out of them for the rest of us. To that end, he's written 15 books, hosted his own television show, done countless radio appearances, and speaks all over the world on an ongoing basis. Interestingly enough, he grew up in Spain, and he does all of his speaking both in English and Spanish. So we welcome him from the Sunshine State of Florida. Ridgeley, take it away.
Muchísimas gracias, Laurie. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to be with all of you today. So, once in a great while, something comes along that is so powerful that it changes the way we view the world and our place in it. And those of us who adopt that thing, that philosophy, find ourselves personally and professionally transformed. I believe there's a better way to know yourself, who you are and what you stand for, a better way to express that to the world so that in turn you attract better people, better colleagues, better clients, and better customers, and that helps you build a better business and a better life. And it all starts with knowing why you do, what you believe, and what that belief system creates in the form of your avatar. Today, we're going to look to do two things. First, I'm going to talk to you about this power philosophy, powerful strategy called your avatar. Secondly, I'm going to tell you a tiny little bit about my personal story. And that's a lot to accomplish, so we're going to jump right in right away. Go back to when you were an infant. When you wanted milk, what did you do? You cried, of course. And somebody brought you milk, at which point an association forms that says, crying equals success. You wake up in the middle of the night, it's dark, you're scared and lonely. What do you do in your crib? You cry. And what happens? Somebody comes and the association gets stronger. Crying equals success. And from that moment forward, every single time that you needed or wanted anything, what did you do? You cried, of course. How many of us have adult relatives that still act that way? I know I do. Anyway, but after a while, your caretakers say, wait a second, you can't just get everything you need and want from crying, and yet you still have those needs. So you've got to figure out something else, some other behavior, some other act that's going to get those needs met. So you try something, and it works. And a tiny filament of belief is formed in that moment. Then you try something else, and it doesn't work. You throw that away. You try something else, it doesn't work. You throw that away. You say, wait a second, let me go back to that first thing, and you do it again, and it works again. And another little filament of belief is formed in that moment. And although one tiny wire filament won't hold up a whole lot, imagine now hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these wires, even thousands, forming one cable that would hold up the Golden Gate Bridge. And in this case, it happens to be your belief system, why you do what you do. So what is your why? It's the filter through which you see everything. It's the lens through which you view the world. It's what makes you unique and different. It's your gift. I think we all want to know our gift. And it's a lot like a natural law. Imagine for a moment that I hold this glass right above my head and open my fingers. What's going to happen? It's going to fall on my head. But what if I said, wait, I'm done with the whole gravity thing. I'm over it. I reject gravity. Forget about it. Hold it above my head, open my fingers. What's going to happen? It's going to fall on my head anyway, because it doesn't matter whether you know about gravity, accept it or reject it, it still affects you. Knowing your why and the avatar that it creates affects every single decision that you're making all day long. And it's so powerful when you do. It creates this avatar of who you are. And you have a strength, which we call a superpower, and you have a weakness that I call a kryptonite. Imagine now for a moment that you could maximize your superpower and minimize your kryptonite. Imagine that you could do that with every member of your team, that they all got each other. They went, wow, I get this person. I know where to go when I need a particular thing. I know how to help them overcome something if it's a challenge for them. So immensely powerful to know your avatar, know your superpower, and know your kryptonite. So let me tell you a little bit about my personal story. It's kind of unique. My great-grandfather, Theodore Hamilton Lastly, started a division of a little bottling operation called Coca-Cola, right? Most of us have heard of this one. As a result of which, I grew up surrounded by an extraordinary amount of wealth. I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother, who called herself Gaga, it was Theodora, Gaga, would send her chauffeur, Thomas, in a black stretch Lincoln Continental limousine to pick up me and my brothers to go up to her home for Christmas. And we would ride up Ridgeley Avenue. That would be Ridgeley, my name, because when I was 3 weeks old, my grandfather, Doc Ridgeley, held me in his hand and said, he will be called Ridgeley. And he was the big Coca-Cola boss at that point, so there was no arguing with him. Up we go up the street all the way to the top, to my grandmother's mega mansion called Dreams Landing. So I'd walk into Dreams Landing, say hello to a bunch of servants, into the great room. All of the rooms at Dreams Landing had a name. The great room was where my grandmother Gaga presided. And there she would be, sitting in her throne, smoking cigarettes out of a gold cigarette holder. To her left was her Yorkshire Terrier Tippy. To her right was a white Pekingese named Teacup. Flying around the room were two parakeets, one named Tuesday and one Thursday after the days that they were picked up. And behind my grandmother was floor-to-ceiling glass looking out over formal gardens with a swimming pool so big that I had a sailboat in it. You can't make that up, right? So we'd go give my grandmother a kiss on the cheek, and within a matter of seconds, she would say, "Run along, children. Your gifts are in the playroom." And she would kick us out like a piece of trash, because in her world, children were to be seen, but not heard. And so off we would go down into the playroom, where there would be a mountain, an absolute mountain of gifts, all of course picked up by Thomas. My grandmother had no idea what they were. And we would rip through the boxes with so little love and emotion attached to any of those toys. We'd throw the toys into the corner and take the boxes and build castles and forts and tunnels, because the imagination of a child is boundless. But I personally found it confusing. It was strange. Why is my grandmother so weird? Why isn't she nice? Why doesn't she play with us? Why don't we make cookies? And yet every one of those experiences, every one of those moments was shaping who I am today, my avatar. Interestingly, my grandmother and my mother fought on and off. And when she was close to dying, my grandmother was such a control maniac that she was trying to get my mother to behave, do what she wanted her to do. My mother didn't. And my grandmother disinherited her only daughter and took the Coca-Cola fortune to the grave where it sits today, until my mother dies, at which point my siblings and I will inherit that money. Can you imagine how the calls go with my mom? "Hey, Mom, how you doing?" "Great." "Bummer." I mean, excellent. "Whoa, sorry, just kidding." I love my mom. However, I will tell you that after thinking about it for many, many years, I'm grateful that my grandmother did that she gave us all a chance to come into our own space, our own lives, to not turn into maybe what she became also, which I found to be very, very sad. And that day will come when my mother passes on and we go into the vaults of PNC Bank and find out about these treasures that are part of the Coca-Cola fortune. And I put on that ring, that scarab ring from the tomb of Tutankhamun, and look up and say, "Gaga, thanks for what you did. Thanks for allowing us to form our own avatars." So let me tell you really briefly about the 7 avatars. I'll go through them really, really quickly. First of all, the giver, the person that always wants to contribute to others, make a difference, add value, have an impact. Of course you want to know who those people are on your team. Number 2, the connector, the person who values bonds and relationships above all else. Trust is their superpower. Amazing people. Number 3, the problem solver. That's me. The problem solver is the person who takes in lots and lots of information and makes sense of it for the rest of us. The problem solver simplifies and clarifies and provides alternatives and options for the rest of the people around them. Number 4, the innovator. The innovator is always looking to improve things, whether that's a small thing like the organization in your garage to a manufacturing plant's streamlined systems. Number 5, the perfectionist. The perfectionist believes that there's a right way to do things and that things should be done right. They believe in systems and understand that when you do A, then B, then C, then D, E is predictable, and therefore that can help you lead a better life. Number 6, the rebel. The rebel thinks differently than everyone else. The rebel lives outside the box. The rebel challenges the status quo. Think Herb Kelleher, think Steve Jobs, right? Good idea to know who those people are on your team. And lastly, number 7, the master. The master loves learning for the sheer sake of absorbing knowledge. Great people who always take things deeper. It is so powerful to know your avatar, to know your superpower, to know your kryptonite. And this is something that I would like to bring to anyone that I can get in front of, because I think it really has a tremendous amount of value. In fact, if you personally are interested in finding out your avatar, discovering that, contact the kind people at Capital City, and with my compliments, I'd be delighted to set up a session, figure out what your avatar is, and talk about what I might be able to do to help your audiences. And I leave you with one final thought. Whenever I do a speaking engagement, I always have 2 overarching objectives above all else. Number 1, to leave everything out there and give everything I have to the people in the audience to make it great for them. And number 2, to make your job as the event planner or organizer as easy, painless, professional, and fun as I possibly can. I'm Ridgeley Goldsborough, and I thank you so very, very much for watching.
And thank you, Ridgeley. Excellent. So we are moving right on. Hey, anybody who might have just joined us, we have a great crowd that's listening in on our first digital showcase. I just want to say a couple things that Erin said in the beginning, in case you weren't here right at the kickoff. You should have a downloadable PDF booklet that we sent to you in advance, and it has a profile on each one of the speakers, and there's a place at the bottom for you to make some notes. So as you're watching each speaker, we hope that you're thinking ahead to meetings or corporate events that you have coming up and making some notes, which ones might be a good match, whether it's for this year or even a future year. Now, keep in mind, if there's a speaker you really like, you will contact Capital City Speakers Bureau and express your interest on behalf of the digital showcase, and they will make sure that they do a match make between the two of you, the client and the speaker, and figure out which of their many speeches might be a match for you. So we hope that this is going well and that you're enjoying it. We sure are having a good time. I can see all the panelists, and we've been enjoying presenting to you. So we are going to move on to our next presenter. Jack Shaw is co-founder and executive director of the American Blockchain Council. As such, he's a leading expert on the strategic business implications of blockchain technology, who has spoken and consulted on blockchain around the world. He is a world-renowned keynote speaker, and he was recently voted one of the world's top 25 professional speakers by over 27,000 meeting planners, executives, and conference attendees. He was the only technology speaker to be accorded this recognition. Jack has been a technology futurist for over 30 years, helping others to understand the impact of emerging technologies. In addition to blockchain, he's widely recognized for his expertise in such breakthrough business technologies as artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and 3D printing. He has advised such Fortune 500 companies as GE, Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, IBM, as well as hundreds of small to mid-sized businesses. A charismatic speaker, he's delivered more than 1,000 keynote speeches and executive presentations in 24 countries and in every state. Jack graduated from Yale and has an MBA from Kellogg. So please welcome Mr. Jack Shaw.
Thank you, Laurie, and hi, everyone. As a professional technology futurist for the past 30 years, I've learned to keep in mind the words of that great philosopher, Yogi Berra, when he said, "Making predictions is very hard, especially about the future." Nevertheless, I'm going to go out on a limb and make some predictions today. So please, join me on a short trip to the near future. In our first scene, a preteen needs orthodontic work, but she and her parents don't just see the nearest orthodontist or one a friend or relative recommends. Instead, they post an online request for proposals that can only be seen by nearby registered orthodontists and receive several. Each states their qualifications and a suggested treatment plan. After speaking to a couple by phone, she and her parents select one to meet with in person. Once they've reviewed the treatment plan and payment schedule with the orthodontist, they authorize it via digital signatures through their smartphones. The family's healthcare insurance makes progress payments immediately on completion of each visit. The family makes their co-payments using their airline frequent flyer miles, and no paperwork is ever required. In our second scene, an aircraft is halfway across the Atlantic when it detects that a critical part must be replaced on arrival. The airline's advanced procurement system scans the internet to identify FAA-certified providers of the required part. The system then negotiates pricing, terms, and conditions with those providers, selects one, and incorporates those terms into a legally enforceable online smart contract. The part's design is then downloaded to a 3D printer at the airport, and the part is waiting when the aircraft arrives. In our third scene, a young couple is buying a new home. They first solicit offers from qualified mortgage providers by authorizing them to securely review their online credit histories. Each mortgage provider responds with approval for a specified purchase price range. The couple then visits each house via virtual reality and selects one they'll go to see in person. On their way, they request a title search and ask each mortgage provider to propose a mortgage plan for this specific property. On arrival, they're delighted to see that the house is just as nice as they had thought. They agree on a purchase price with the seller and select a mortgage plan. Since the title search has already been completed by this time, they close the deal on the spot. Again, via digital signatures on their smartphones. No paperwork, no brokers, no attorneys, and no keys are even exchanged, as all of the systems, the house itself and access to all its systems, are now controlled via their own biometrics, fingerprints, voice prints, and retinal scans. What will make all of these extraordinary developments possible? Well, certainly a large number of technologies come into play: 3D printing, virtual reality, biometrics, and more. But there's one other technology that runs through all of these examples. This technology doesn't simply enable improvements in specific areas, it facilitates the digital transformation of entire business and social ecosystems. Healthcare, transportation, manufacturing, financial services, and real estate are just a few of the many potential applications of this exciting new technology across every industry, including yours. Many have already recognized that this technology is the most significant to emerge since the internet itself. And in their October 2015 issue, The Economist magazine said this technology is the most important advance in record keeping since the invention of double-entry bookkeeping in Florence, Italy in 1494, over 500 years ago. While this technology has been around for nearly a decade, most people have heard of it in just the past year or so. It's called blockchain technology. When I keynoted the Global Blockchain Week conference in London earlier this year, I pointed out that wherever people, processes, businesses, government, or the social good requires proof of identity, of ownership, of transactions, or of contractual commitments, blockchain technologies promise to meet those needs with a degree of trust and integrity never before possible. How do blockchain technologies do that? Well, they do four important things. First, they create an immutable, unchangeable, time-stamped record of identity, ownership, transactions, or contractual commitments. Second, they allow two or more entities, people, businesses, or other organizations, to share this information on the internet without having to rely on any one of the others or to pay a third-party service to be the master record keeper. This has huge implications for most industries because it eliminates the need for businesses to do nothing more than act as informational intermediaries. Third, they provide complete transparency for all those so authorized to easily view or update that information. And fourth, they provide unhackable security against those who are not authorized to change or even see that information. The first use case for the blockchain is the digital currency Bitcoin. In fact, blockchain technology was originally developed to enable this first functional digital currency. For over 8 years now, the Bitcoin blockchain has been working and billions of dollars of transactions have taken place. Yet, despite the efforts of the world's most cunning specialists, the Bitcoin blockchain has never been hacked. People quickly realized that if we can use the blockchain for digital currency, we can also use it for other digital assets like electronic medical records, a 3D printing file, or a real estate property deed. It's already producing astonishing results. For example, last fall, I keynoted the Global Big Data Conference in Qingdao, a major port city on the northeast coast of China. By an extraordinary coincidence, the weekend before the conference, a ship arrived in Qingdao with a load of cotton being sold from a company in Houston, Texas, to a buyer in China. Now, typically in international trade today, processing the paperwork to transfer ownership and pay the seller and the freight carrier takes about 10 days. In this case, though, because the information was shared on the blockchain, ownership was transferred and the seller and the freight carrier were paid in full in 10 minutes. And I was able to tell my audience in Qingdao about it just 3 days later. In a full presentation, I explain in clear, non-technical terms what blockchain is, what it does, how it works, and why it's never been hacked. In these highly customized programs, I share relevant examples showing how blockchain is being used today and how its use will significantly change their industry in the near future. Of course, recognizing the impact of blockchain helps most when they also understand how to plan for it. So I usually close by describing a simple 3-step strategic planning process that their organizations can use to take full advantage of blockchain and other emerging technologies to achieve digital transformation. If you think we've seen a lot of changes in our world in the 10 years now since the first smartphones were introduced, you ain't seen nothing yet. Driven by a host of emerging technologies, most importantly blockchain, we'll see more change in the next 10 years than we've seen in the past 50. By having me speak for your audiences, you'll help them to understand these changes and what they can do about it. That way they can do more than just try to cope with these changes. They'll be able to anticipate and plan for them. This will ensure that they and their organizations, your organizations, not only survive, but thrive in the age of digital transformation. I look forward to working with you. Thanks for listening.
We are ready to shake it up just a little bit. Our next speaker, she is a writer, market researcher, and generational expert with Bridgeworks, a company that has been dedicated to bridging the generational divide in the workplace and the marketplace for over 16 years. Through their cutting-edge research and best-selling books, Bridgework has helped some of the country's best companies work through the inevitable clashes that happen between traditionalists, baby boomers, generational Xers, and millennials. Hannah is a millennial who grew up watching Full House, dancing to the Backstreet Boys songs, and has a vast collection of participation awards, including a 6th place swim trophy. Today, she's a renowned keynote speaker, and we're thrilled to have her here. Please welcome, from Minneapolis, Minnesota, Hannah Ubel.
Thank you very much, Laurie. I'm so happy to be joining this group here today with all these excellent speakers. Happy to be joining Capital City Speakers Bureau. And I do want to say just right away, if anyone is wondering, yes, there were only 6 people in that race. So I definitely did not deserve a trophy for getting 6th place in a swim race. And that's just a fact across a lot of my own cohort, the millennial generation. A lot of us got rewards for trying, but I will say that none of us gave them to ourselves. This is what I do. I talk about the millennial generation. I talk about all other generations, and I've been doing it for a while now. And at first, I was hired at Bridgeworks because every manager and leader and executive was so confused about how to recruit and maintain and engage my generation. Of course, when I was hired, I thought, how could that possibly be? We're all gems. We're amazing to work with. I definitely learned after that there were some differences between us. And it's funny now, many years after I started with the organization, still the #1 question that we get asked is about millennials. So you might be sitting there today wondering, why are we talking about millennials? Haven't we already heard everything there is to know about them? The oldest is around 37, so what are we doing talking about this group? And I'll tell you that there are many reasons to talk about them, but the biggest one is because we're huge. We're going to be 75% of the workforce by 2025. And also, if you look at our track record in organizations, we tend to not stick around very long. A recent Deloitte study found that more than 1/3 of us plan to leave our organization within 2 years. Another report by Recruitify found that 86% of us wouldn't think twice before leaving our current employer. So that means that there's this challenge that a lot of organizations have in understanding who millennials are. Here's the other challenge on top of that is when I ask how many of you are sick and tired of hearing about millennials, and then a lot of people raise their hands, and then I ask how many of you are millennials, about 80% of the people are still holding their hands up in the air because millennials are sick and tired of being stereotyped. You've all heard the stereotypes for the millennial generation, and we're not the first ones. Baby boomers, when they entered work, they were stereotyped as the hippie generation, me, me, me. Generation Xers, when they went to work, they were the slackers. They were apathetic, listened to grunge and Nirvana and Run DMC, and were going to go into the workplace with flannel shirts and on their skateboards, right? Millennials are not the first ones to be stereotyped. However, everyone right now, you might be thinking some of these words to yourself. They think that we are lazy, narcissistic, entitled. We cry when you give us feedback. We're obsessed with our parents. We're really, really sensitive. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So then the question is, if you want to recruit and retain and engage top millennial talent, what do you do? And it begins with understanding who the millennial generation is. When we look at the millennial cohort, and any generation for that matter, it's not just about their traits and what they value, it's why do they have those traits? And to find that, we look at what you experienced during your formative years. So during your teenage years. Now, the millennial cohort, we define them as being born between 1980 and 1995. So that will give you a frame of reference of who I'm talking about. And when we look at the events and conditions that shaped them, there are a few that were resoundingly powerful in shaping who we were. The first is technology. Everyone calls us tech addicts, that we're addicted to our phones. Every generation's addicted to their phones. But for millennials, it was a huge part of our life growing up. So consider early millennials. The first computer they ever used, remember the Commodore 64? Maybe the Macintosh computer? The Macintosh computer was 128 kilobytes. Okay, to put that into perspective, that's about the size of 2 tweets on Twitter today. So, I mean, I don't know what was on that computer except for like the original Oregon Trail, Paint probably. But you think about early millennials, they then graduated from university, and that computer had turned into the first generation iPhone that could download ringtones 10 times the size of the storage of the Macintosh computer. That is massive change in a very short amount of time. So when you hear about millennials being really impatient and they want to change things all the time, it's because everything in the world was constantly changing. So if they're put into a work environment and nothing's changing around them, of course they're going to try to create it. So technology is a really big influencer for us. And then another one, of course, is that we are the 9/11 generation. When we were growing up, violence was just everywhere in front of us. And other generations, they saw it happen oceans away. They saw it happen on the TVs in their living room. But we're the generation of Columbine, of Virginia Tech, of 9/11. It was happening right next to us. So what happened as a result is all the adults in our lives said, we want to make you feel safe because the world is scary. So they asked us to speak up. There was an increase in public funding for guidance counselors when millennials were growing up. And I remember this, my guidance counselor, when she would come to my classroom, her name was Miss Guest, and she would say, hi, everyone. Safe space, okay? How do you feel today? And then we would talk about our feelings for a good hour. I'm not kidding you. If you were sarcastic, you had to go outside because that wasn't allowed. We made warm fuzzies with cotton balls and like eyes on them, and then we had to compliment people and give them out. And I know that many people, when they hear this, they groan, especially Xers. They're like, that is the cheesiest thing I've ever heard in the entire world. And I'll tell you, we thought it was cheesy too, but we felt really good afterwards. And then I would go home and talk to my dad, my baby boomer dad, and I'd say, Dad, you're having a tough time in school. Like, did you talk to your guidance counselor? He's like, no, Hannah, what's a guidance counselor? Absolutely not. What are they doing in school these days? It was a completely different conversation for him. So thinking about technology, thinking about that exposure that we had to counselors, to leaders, to teachers, to our principals in school, it was instantly a very informal kind of relationship. And beyond that, I mean, when we think about our relationships with people in positions of authority, that relationship was closest with our parents. Now, thinking about at the workplace today, who millennials are, the question I get all the time is, how do I motivate these kids today? What do I do? And this is a reasonable question, because typically what happens is that we manage and lead in the way that we always wish we were managed and led. So when we look at motivation, oftentimes a trend and a pattern that we see is baby boomers. This is the group that when they went to work, they were with millions of peers. So the way to set themselves apart from the side is they wanted awards and certificates. So they would know they were doing a really good job if their manager said, here you go, here's a certificate for Employee of the Year. And the baby boomers, they're like, this is great, thank you so much. Now I'm going to manage Gen Xers. And they gave Xers these plaques and certificates. And Xers were thinking, yeah, if you could just use the money that you used to purchase that plaque and put it into my pocket, that would be a lot more motivating. So then Gen Xers are thinking, okay, money, this is a really good motivator. What I'm going to do for millennials, I'm going to give them tons of money. They're going to love this. And millennials they get the money and they say, yeah, but what else? Money is just one part of the story. So then if you're thinking about how to motivate them, consider for a second how communication and motivation has changed. In the past, a work environment, if the boss said jump, what would you say? How high? You say jump to a millennial, what are we going to say? Why? Why would we jump? Jumping's dumb. I think there's a different way we should do this. It won't hurt your knees. We always push back and ask why. And the reason is because, first of all, we grew up in a democratic household with our baby boomer parents who always encouraged us to push back and question and ask why. We grew up with posters in our classroom that said, there is no I in team, 2 heads are better than 1, 3 heads are better than 2. Which is very different than Xers who grew up with a poster on the wall that said, hang in there. And the other difference too, speaking of Xers, they also grew up with posters that said, just do it, with Michael Jordan and the Nike swoosh. That was the motto. But millennials were thinking, yeah, but why should we do it? Can we do it as a team? Can we get this together? Can we do it in a new way? So we were encouraged to ask why and push back. In a work environment, that's what we want, to feel motivated and to feel valued. We want leaders and managers to say, what do you think? What's your opinion? It doesn't mean that we need to have final input on what's happening, but we do want to know that we have a voice and that we're being heard. So if you do work with millennials, lead millennials, or manage them, if you want to know how to engage with them, just ask them to share their voice. And if you are a millennial who's listening, we have to know how to cater what we say when we speak to other people. We need to think in terms of evolution, not revolution. I was with a nursing group one time actually, and I was hearing about these young nurses who had all these really fantastic ideas, but when they would bring them forward, they weren't always heard. And so one time I was speaking to this young nurse and she said, Hannah, everything you're saying is so on point and I just want to help the team and I really think we can help our patients. This is so exciting, but my manager hates me and doesn't want to listen to anything I say. Okay, let me talk to your manager. And I was talking to her manager and she said, oh yeah, yeah, I kind of hate her. I'm not going to lie to you. It's like, whoa, why? She said, well, she was 2 weeks in, she was learning, she was being educated, and she wanted to completely change the way we've been doing things for 5 years, and there were processes that I had developed. I felt so disrespected, I couldn't even hear her. And so my lesson then to millennials is you need to know how you're positioning your ideas. And that is the message for everything we do at Bridgeworks. We don't believe that our differences have to divide us, they have to unite us. And we all need to know the different ways that we can bend. So I hope that I have the opportunity to work with you to talk about bridging across generations, whether it's millennials or Gen Xers or baby boomers, or even the generation after my own, Generation Edge. So I look forward to hearing from you, to hopefully working with you. And with that, I will say thank you to Laurie and to Capital City Speakers Bureau, and I'll pass it back to you, Laurie.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Our final speaker of the day is fantastic on the platform, and that's exactly where he is today. He's on stage working, so he's disappointed not to join us live, but he did send a video just for this event. Erik Bowles is an executive advisor, coach, trainer, and keynotes major leadership and sales meetings around the world. He is the author of several executive and emerging sales leader development programs that are used across the globe and have been translated into 7 different languages. His brand new book, Moving to Great: Unleashing Your Best in Life and Work, was just released in April. And prior to becoming an authority on leadership, teamwork, and managing and leading change, Erik was introduced to many of these principles of high performance while playing in the National Football League with the New York Jets and the Green Bay Packers.
Thank you, Laurie, for that introduction. Erik Bowles here. We're going to start fast. We're going to finish strong. I'm excited to talk to you about a subject that every one of you are dealing with. Every place I go around the world, they're dealing with. And that is change. Now, when I describe change, I like to define it as to transform, to shift, to evolve, to be better today than I was yesterday, to be better tomorrow than I am today. We're all dealing with change. We're all being asked to change. Now, they may use different words to describe it. In organizations that I deal with, they have all kinds of euphemisms for the word change. They use words like, we need to streamline operations. We need to improve our employee engagement. We need to get better at our workforce diversity, especially when it comes to diversity of thought. They're going through mergers, acquisitions. They're wanting to increase competition. They want to have more of a global presence, have more of a entry point into new markets and niches that they want to take advantage of. Every one of those words simply means we need to change. From a personal standpoint, what changes are you going through right now? I know for my wife and I, we're not far away from, we're parents of 2 daughters. Soon we're going to be empty nesters. That is a serious change. What I'm looking forward to, but that is a serious change. Man, we got parents who are getting older. We have health dynamics. For many people out there, all kinds of things. Some of you who are watching this right now, all kinds of changes taking place in your personal life. And as they're taking place in your personal life, they're also influencing your professional life. We're all being asked to change. So the question is, what gets in the way of that happening? How do we ensure that we thrive and not just survive these changes? How do we make sure we manage it and not become victims of it? We want to create the change we're looking for. We want to control it. We want to manage it. And that's what we want to describe and take time to just talk about today. Now, I will be honest with you. The things that I'm going to talk about are pretty simple. They're not that complicated at all. Now, they're simple. I didn't say easy. But I like to call myself Captain Obvious for a reason. Because I like to talk in terms of aha moments. And an aha is simply when the obvious slaps you upside the head. Okay? So I'm going to be talking about a lot of obvious things, and hopefully those ahas have the same impact on you. So let's jump into it. What gets in the way of us being at our best, really thriving in these times of change? I like to say there's 4 things, and let me start with the first one. The first one is an attitude. It's a mindset. It's an attitude that simply says, I am okay the way that I am. I'm okay the way I am. Now, I will tell you, I do believe that we don't necessarily have to be sick in order to get better. But that mindset is a very dangerous mindset to have, especially in the day and age that we're living right now. I run into organizations who think this way. There's organizations who no longer exist because of this mindset. And the problem is, as things are changing, as things are improving, the bottom line is, however hard you worked a year ago to exceed your customers' expectations, you may be working just as hard today and now only meeting their expectations. Well, welcome to the new reality, right? I mean, it's not enough to just sit back and hope things work out in your favor. I remember during my football playing days, I played in the NFL for a few years, and there was a method, a certain play that we would call at the end of a game that many times didn't necessarily make sure we won. It almost prevented us from winning. And that play call was called the prevent defense. What it really means is it's called playing not to lose instead of playing to win. We took chances, we took risks, we did everything necessary to get the lead, and then at the end, we start playing to protect the lead instead of building on that lead. This mindset happens to organizations all the time. It happens to people all the time. We start playing not to, we stop doing the things that allowed us to be successful in the first place. And this attitude right now is a very dangerous one in the days and times we're living in now, because change is happening too quick. What allowed you to get a lead a year ago, you may have to do something different to build on that lead today. That's the reality that we're living in. One other dynamic that's dangerous when it comes to that attitude of I'm okay the way I am from a personal standpoint, it has a tendency to believe that it's everybody else who needs to improve and not us. I'm an incredible husband. It's just my wife doesn't realize how good she has it. I'm a great boss. I'm a great manager. It's just these idiots I got to work with. I am a great, service provider. It's just my clients don't have a clue. At the end of the day, we're just pointing the fingers everywhere else, not realizing it's us who need to grow. See, what's incredible is there's a quote by a gentleman named Eric Hoffer who said it best. He simply said this. He said, in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned are beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. It is a dangerous thing to be a know-it-all. It is a safe thing to be a learn-it-all. See, when you're a learner, you're an earner. If you want to keep earning, you need to keep learning. For those who consider themselves know-it-all and I got everything I need to know, here's the problem. You may know a lot, but you know a lot about a world that no longer exists. So we need to stay curious. We need to always be green and growing, as my mentor would tell me often. He says, Erik, you got to know, this has nothing to do with age. When you're green, you grow. But when you're ripe, you rot. So you want learning to be a continual thing. So that's one of the things that can get in the way. The second thing that can get in the way is fear of the unknown. Fear of uncertainty. It's been said that people would choose unhappiness over uncertainty. They would rather be unhappy and certain about it instead of take the risk to do what they really want to do. Take the risk of uncertainty. So how do we overcome the fear of the unknown? Here's a simple way. By making the unknown known. It's simple. You know this already. It's goal setting. Goal setting is just designing what you would like your future to look like. It is making the unknown known. Goal setting to your purpose, to your excitement, to dealing with change is like what weights are in the weight room of achievement, are like resistance to your muscle. It builds you. Any area of your life where there are no goals, it will atrophy. You show me a company without a vision. You show me a company without a goal or a plan. And I show you a company that begins to shrivel. Biblically, it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. So this is one thing that we do. In times of change, we have to decide what we want the future to look like. We can't sit back and just let it happen to us. The next one is the fear of failure. And the fear of failure is something we really have to embrace in these times we're living in. We can't avoid failure anymore. We need to celebrate it. And we need to fail faster. In times of change, we have to fail fast. We need to make mistakes. Now, keep something in mind. I may fail at a task, but that doesn't make me a failure. And not enough are we celebrating mistakes. We're spending far too much time trying to cover up mistakes. We need to fail faster. We need to realize that failure is training. It's teaching us. It helps us get better. And the last one I want to deal with is the fear of rejection. Fear of rejection manifests itself in the ability or inability to give and receive feedback. We are living in a day where we need feedback faster and more frequently than ever before. The days of the 360 anonymous feedback tools and annual performance reviews are over. There is no way we are going to course correct fast enough to do the right thing. Answer this question for me. What does it feel like to be wrong? Yeah, it sucks. Nobody likes it. It's frustrating. But what you really just answered just now was what it feels like when you find out you were wrong. There's a chance you were wrong the whole time. Think about that for a second. Therefore, we're living in a day and age where we need to feedback faster than we've ever gotten it before. I'm telling you right now, we do those 4 things. Everything happens better. We get quicker. We thrive in these times of change. Thank you so much for this short time I had with you. God bless.
Our inaugural digital showcase of speakers. I want to say thank you to all 7 speakers for taking time out of their busy schedules in order to make today work. And then a special thanks to everybody out there viewing from around the country. Thanks for giving us some time. I've got some drawings here, but before we go any further, I want to thank a special person, Laurie Guest, not only for speaking, but for being a planner in this event, and then also for being our digital MC. Fantastic job. We hope that everybody enjoyed this. Couple things before we wrap up with our drawings here. You know, we really hope that you just heard from one of your future keynote speakers. So a quick reminder, turn in the information sheets. Let us know what you thought. We're going to send you a survey out, and we want to hear detailed feedback that you have from the speakers, and they're real excited and interested to hear. And then in addition to that, give us some feedback on this digital platform. We want to know how to improve this in the future. What did you like? What did you didn't like? How did you like the topics? How did you like the time frame? All of those things, we're open to your suggestions. So let us know what we can do to make this a better planning tool for your future meetings. One last thing, if you needed to jump off early, or if you had any colleagues that needed to leave early, we did record today's showcase. So I'll be sending out a link to everyone who registered, and feel free to share those with your meeting planning partners internally. Now let's get to 6 more drawings, and then we'll get you back to your days. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. Get back to your days. Something that Craig had said really resonated. You know, I got in from work today and I jumped out of my car and I said, I love my job. These speakers are awesome. I get to talk with them every single week, and I hope to work with you and put you in touch with them for a future event. Take care, everyone.